Early voting in Arizona's primary is underway. The Republican Senate candidates faced off in a fierce debate last night. The GOP Senate race in Arizona is emerging as one of the most expensive of this election cycle. Jim Lehman, who is self-funding his campaign, has already poured in nearly $8 million, buying TV ads, of course. The super PAC known as Saving Arizona, that's a quote, is backing candidate Blake Masters and has spent more than $7 million on ads. We should point out, Masters endorsed by former President Trump. Masters, Lehman, and another GOP contender, Mark Brnovich, are vying to take on Democratic Senator Mark Kelly this November. Kelly announced Wednesday he has raised $13.6 million in the second quarter of 2022 alone. Joining us now is CBS News tech and politics reporter Musadiq Bidar and CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, we talked about the 13.6 he reported quarter two. That brings his cash on hand, that's available campaign reserves, to $25 million. What does that mean?
Well, it means for him and other Democrats that have posted numbers like him, it helps provide a base to try and separate themselves from the national environment. We have an environment where the economic frustrations voters have, they kind of place that on the top Democrat right now in the White House, President Biden. And with the high sums for these Democratic senators and candidates, they can spend however much time on the airwaves that they want. They can look to define the Republican opponents early, and as Moose mentioned, bring up their name ID. And they would tell you money is not everything in these races. And for a lot of these Democratic senators and candidates, how much money they are spending to make money, how much is coming from the state itself, are also important questions. We'll know more about that data after this Friday when all the reports are due, but that can help define how much grassroots support is really there for these candidates and can help define if these candidates or these races will really be competitive.
So, Musadiq, you talked about both the governor's race and the Senate race on the Republican side. Are there issues in particular that are emerging or cutting more harshly or more visibly than others?
Yeah, well, immigration and abortion have been two issues that are top of mind for voters there in Arizona, and it's something that has come up in the debates on the campaign trail. But this is part of the reason why this race has been so expensive, this primary, is because these candidates are really trying to differentiate themselves. And what we're seeing in Arizona, particularly with the governor's race, is you've got this proxy battle developing where you have your more traditional conservative candidate in Karen Taylor Robeson going against Kari Lake, who is endorsed by President Trump and more of a MAGA candidate, America First candidate, as she likes to call herself. And so we're seeing this proxy battle take place in Arizona among the Republican candidates. And really that'll tell us a lot about where Arizona is going to go in the future and what this is going to look like in the general election in November. And so, it's worth also mentioning that a lot of these ads we're seeing are starting to turn negative. So much so that at last night's Senate GOP debate, the moderator had to ask the candidates about this and ask them whether or not these negative ads are helpful at a time when a lot of voters in Arizona are struggling with inflation, where prices have increased at some of the highest levels in the country. And both of those candidates, Lehman and Masters, defended their negative ads and said that they want to come off as somebody who is going to fight for some of these issues. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
And the truth is, after every competitive primary, negative ads make it sometimes more difficult to bring back party unity on behind whoever emerges as the nominee. Aaron, let's shift our attention to Georgia. Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock raked in more than $17.2 million just in the second quarter. I mean, it's a sizable amount of money. That's doubling what Republican challenger Herschel Walker has so far amassed. And the persistent question I hear in Washington among Republicans is Walker's campaign in trouble?
I think it's fair to say Walker's troubles were there before Warnock's numbers came in this week. Walker has had some recent controversy regarding whether he was telling the truth about how many children he has. He has some comments he made about climate change that have been scrutinized by Democrats. Warnock's sum is a lot of money, no question. He can spend that more on ads to continue to define Walker, perhaps through some of the recent stories about him. But it does not put this race away by any means. A new poll this morning from the Georgia AARP that was conducted as some of these stories about Walker were first coming out, had Warnock leading by just 3 points within the margin of error. The fact that the gap is that size, after nearly $33 million in spending on ads from Warnock since the primary, it shows that this race is going to be close regarding how much money, disregard, or even if both sides have a lot of money, no doubt.
And that goes, Aaron, to the point you made earlier about the very difficult environment Democrats find themselves in. Musadiq, back to Arizona. I want to ask you about former President Trump's endorsement of Blake Masters and his presence sort of writ large in Arizona. What does it mean? What's it telling us? Maybe, if anything.
It's been huge so far for Blake Masters. We have seen him experience a little bit of a bump in the polls. Masters was coming in at around 10, 11 points early on. Mark Brnovich, the state attorney general, was leading the race at that time. But since that Trump endorsement last month, Masters has seen a huge bump. The latest poll showed him up 7, 8 points in Arizona. And it's worth mentioning President Trump is going to be in Arizona this Saturday campaigning for Blake Masters and Kari Lake. And Masters hasn't been shy about bragging about that Trump endorsement. It's his Twitter header photo. He brought it up several times in a debate last night, especially when Layman attacked him for previously writing that he supports open borders. Masters fired back and said, look, President Trump endorsed me because I'm an America First candidate and I have strong border policies. So the president's endorsement here is going to be really interesting. Although when I speak with Layman's camp, some of the sources close to his campaign tell me that they're not as worried about this. They say that they didn't see as significant of a jump in support for Masters as something that we might have seen earlier in the year where the president endorsed, for example, J.D. Vance in Ohio, and that really helped catapult him to the top of that race. So it has helped Masters, but there are people on the other side who feel that they still have a shot despite the president's support for Blake Masters in this race.
Musadiq, you have given me a beautiful bridge to my next question, which is about Ohio and the Democratic congressman who is a Senate nominee, Tim Ryan, raising more than $9 million in quarter number 2. Now, Republican opponent J.D. Vance hasn't put out his second quarter numbers yet. Aaron, what does Ohio look like, and is Ryan in any position to achieve something that would be, I think, regarded fairly as an upset?
Yeah, well, it'll help Ryan. It puts him in a better position than he would be to make the state that voted for Trump in the last 2 elections a competitive race. But he's also had to spend money already, more than $15 million spent on ads since that May 3rd primary. And polls show either Vance ahead by a couple of single digits or Ryan within the margin of error. I would add that even if Vance's official campaign numbers are not out, numbers for groups supporting him have been posted. The pro-Vance group, Protect Ohio Values, raised $7 million over this quarter. Over $5 million of that is from GOP megadonor Peter Thiel, but those are funds that can be used to hit Tim Ryan on their airwaves. So while Ryan has a lot of money and Vance's numbers aren't out yet, there are groups that will help Vance down the road.
Musadiq Bidar and Aaron Navarro, thank you for the knowledge. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Major.